This is something I still can't quite explain, and honestly, it keeps me up some nights thinking about it. It happened last winter. I was driving home late after a long shift at the hospital. Snow had started falling earlier in the evening, covering everything in a thick, soft blanket. It was beautiful, serene, but driving in it was a pain. My route takes me past an old cemetery. Nothing unusual, just your standard small-town resting place with a wrought iron fence and weathered tombstones. I've driven past it hundreds of times, never thought much of it. But that night, something caught my eye as I passed. A figure, standing among the tombstones, barely visible through the falling snow. It was late, well past midnight, and freezing, no place for anyone to just be standing around. Concerned, I slowed down. The figure was wearing what looked like an old-fashioned dress, just standing there, staring at the ground. I couldn't see her face, just the outline of her form illuminated by my headlights as they cut through the snow. I stopped the car and called out, asking if she needed help. No response. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge me at all. Now, I'm not one to spook easily. I'm a nurse. I've seen it all. But something about this just felt off. I called out again, louder, but still nothing. At this point, I'm thinking maybe it's someone in shock, maybe hypothermia. I should do something, right? I pulled over, grabbed my coat, and got out of the car. The cold hit me like a wall, and the silence was just eerie. I approached cautiously, noticing how she didn't react at all. Not to the crunch of my boots in the snow, not to my voice as I called out to her again. I was about 10 feet away when I finally saw her face, or rather, where her face should have been. It was just blank, no features, like a mannequin or something. I stopped dead in my tracks, heart pounding. That's when she, or it, suddenly looked up at me. I can't explain it, but one moment there was nothing. The next, there were eyes, dark and empty. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off her until I bumped into my car. I fumbled for the door, got in, and locked it right away. When I dared to look up, she was gone, just vanished. No tracks in the snow, nothing. I drove home faster than I should have, glancing in my rearview mirror every few seconds. I haven't taken that route home since then, and I probably never will again. I've tried rationalizing it. Sleep deprivation, the snow playing tricks on my eyes. But deep down, I know what I saw, and it terrifies me. Hey everyone, something really intense happened to me a few weeks ago, and I've only just felt calm enough to talk about it. I work late nights at a bar downtown, usually closing up around 3 a.m. It's a rough area, but I've always felt pretty confident about handling myself. Until that night. I was locking up, same as always, when I noticed a guy in a hooded jacket lingering across the street. Not totally unusual, but something about how he was watching the bar made me uneasy. I kept an eye on him as I locked the door, and just as I turned to walk to my car, he started crossing the street towards me. My first thought was maybe he needed to ask for directions or something, but it was late, and we were pretty much alone out there. He called out, "Hey, you got the time?" Standard question, but his tone was off. I told him, keeping my distance, and that's when I saw another guy coming up from behind him, also heading my way. Alarm bells went off. I started walking faster towards my car, which was parked a bit down the block. I heard their footsteps quicken behind me, and one of them shouted, "Hey, don't be rude, man!" I didn't want to run and escalate things, but I also knew I had to put distance between us. As I reached my car, I fumbled with my keys. Classic, right? My heart was pounding, and I finally got the door open when I felt a hand grab my shoulder. I spun around, and it was the first guy. He was closer now, and I could see his face under the streetlight. Hard, cold. Definitely not just here for small talk. He said, Give us your wallet and you won't get hurt." The other guy was right there too, blocking my other side. Now, I'm not a fighter, but I also knew giving them my wallet wasn't going to guarantee anything. So I did the only thing I could think of. I threw my keys as far as I could down the street and shouted for help at the top of my lungs. It startled them, giving me just a second to break away. They hesitated, probably deciding whether to chase my keys or come after me, which gave me enough time to run. I booked it down the street, headed for any open store I could find. Thankfully, a 24-hour convenience store was just a couple blocks away. The store clerk called the cops, and I waited there, shaking like a leaf, until they showed up. They patrolled the area but didn't find them. They told me I was lucky to get away and that I did the right thing by creating a distraction and making noise. I've been super vigilant since then, and the bar's upped its security. I can handle a lot, but that was a whole different level of fear. Makes you realize how quickly things can turn dangerous in the right circumstances. I need to share something weird that happened to me last week. I'm not really sure what to make of it, and I'm still a bit shaken up. Last Thursday, I decided to go for a late-night drive, just to clear my head. I've been under a lot of stress at work, and a quiet drive seemed like a good escape. I live near some pretty dense woodlands, perfect for losing yourself in the winding back roads, which is exactly what I wanted. I drove around for maybe an hour listening to some old rock music when I realized I was pretty far out and not exactly sure where. The road was narrower than usual, trees tightly packed like a dark wall on either side. My GPS wasn't updating properly. It kept spinning and losing signal. Classic, right? Just my luck. I thought about turning back, but I was curious about where the road would lead. It was stupid, I know, especially as fog started rolling in, thickening quickly until I could barely see a few feet ahead of my car. That should have been my cue to turn around, but I pressed on, slower now, straining to see through the mist. Then, the car started acting up. The engine was making this whining noise every now and then, like it was struggling. I prayed it wouldn't die on me out there. Suddenly, my headlights caught something. A road sign, finally. It was partially obscured by overgrowth, but I could make out it was some kind of trailhead with a parking area. I figured I could pull over, check my phone for any signal, and use the moment to see what was up with my car. Just as I pulled into the parking area, my engine cut out. Great. The silence that followed was eerie. All I could hear was the ticking of the engine cooling down and my own breathing. I tried to start the car again. Nothing. Not even a sputter. My phone had no service either, which sent a chill down my spine. I decided to wait it out until morning. It wasn't the best plan, but what choice did I have? I locked all the doors and tried to make myself as comfortable as possible in the driver's seat. But every little sound outside seemed amplified. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling. I tried telling myself it was just the wind or a small animal, probably a raccoon. Hours dragged by. My eyes were heavy, but every time I nearly drifted off, a new sound would jerk me awake. Then, around what I guessed was 3 a.m., I saw something that made my heart stop. In the dim light filtering through the fog, there was a figure moving at the edge of the tree line. It was too big to be an animal, and it sort of swayed or limped. I squinted, trying to see better, but it was too far and too vague. My first thought was a lost hiker, maybe someone who needed help. But why would they be out here in the middle of the night, in the fog? I rolled down my window a crack, enough to call out, "Hello? Do you need help?" My voice sounded weirdly loud in the silence. No reply. The figure stopped moving, just standing there. I called out again, and still nothing. The unease turned into real fear. I rolled up the window, my hands shaking. That's when the figure started moving towards the car, not walking, but kind of dragging itself. I couldn't see clearly, but it seemed wrong. Its movements were jerky, unnatural. I scrambled to try the ignition again, heart pounding. Nothing. The figure was getting closer. I could barely make out any features, just a silhouette, but it felt menacing, looming larger as it approached. I was about to scream when suddenly my engine roared to life. I didn't hesitate, slamming the car into reverse and peeling out of the parking area. I didn't stop until I reached my house, slamming and locking the door behind me, gasping for breath. Looking back, I don't know what I saw or if it was just my imagination running wild. But I know I heard something scratching at my car window as I left. A slow, deliberate scrape. I haven't gone back there, and I don't think I ever will. This is something that still rattles me when I think about it. It happened last summer, and to be honest, it's why I now have a home security system and a big dog. I live alone in a house that's a bit out of the way, surrounded by lots of trees and not many neighbors. It's usually peaceful, a great place to unwind after work, which is why I moved there in the first place. One night I was binge-watching some series and had just turned off the TV to head to bed when I heard a noise outside. It sounded like someone fumbling with something at the back of my house. At first, I thought it might be an animal. We get raccoons and the occasional deer. But then I remembered I'd left some tools out back after fixing up some fencing that afternoon. I figured I'd better check in case it was someone trying to steal them. I grabbed my flashlight and went out the back door. As I stepped outside, the motion light kicked on, and I saw a guy halfway through the small window of my shed. He'd already managed to open it and was trying to climb in. I shouted at him, asking what the hell he thought he was doing. He scrambled out and stood up, and that's when I saw he wasn't alone. There were 2 others with him, just a few feet away, watching. Now I'm not small, but I'm also not equipped to deal with 3 guys in the middle of the night. The first guy started apologizing, saying they thought the house was empty and they were just looking for a place to crash. But that didn't sit right with me. Why break into a shed if you're just looking for shelter? I told them to leave before I called the cops, trying to keep my voice steady. They backed off slowly, but kept watching me, which was unnerving. I went back inside and immediately called the police, watching from the window as they vanished into the woods. The police came and checked around, but there wasn't much they could do except tell me to call again if they showed up. I didn't sleep a wink that night, and the next day I went out and got a security system and started looking into getting a dog. Nothing like that has happened since, thank goodness. Thank you for watching. If you found these stories gripping, don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling content. For another hair-raising tale, check out our suggested video. And if you're hungry for more eerie encounters, dive into our playlist featuring similar chilling narratives.